Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
I've mentioned before that anytime there's money involved, scams arise. And what's scary is scams involving people's deaths. And the funeral home industry actually had to get kind of brought into line a few years ago because there's a lot of shady practices in the funeral home industry. And the Federal Trade Commission actually had to pass a bunch of rules about how funeral homes behave because there were actually shady practices. And they had probably arisen because a lot of people know that if you are in grief, you can be taken advantage of. And so I'm not saying all the funeral homes were doing it, but some were. But universally, we know that if somebody is mourning a loved one, they're in grief, there's a good chance that someone could take advantage of them if they could only find these people. And so there's a despicable funeral home scam targeting grieving family members. And several people sent this to me, and this is one of those ones that's shocking, but once you hear how it works, you go, oh, it makes complete sense. It's actually remarkably easy to do. Rick Shapiro wrote this for NBC. So a woman lost her husband of 22 years to lung cancer, and someone called and said he worked at the funeral home that was handling his cremation. He said, I needed to make a deposit for insurance, and it was urgent. Now, she lives in Bonita Springs, Florida. She's 58 years old. And the man on the phone told her that she owed $5,000, but she could pay the initial installment of $2,500 using Zelle or Apple Pay. Now, generally speaking, when you hear people talking about gift cards or Zelle or Apple Pay, you start wondering, okay, is this really on the up and up? She said she should have known then that something was off, but she wasn't thinking clearly. It was very early in the morning. She'd had a bad night. And the man on the phone had a southern accent and was real personable and didn't sound suspicious. She tried to make the payments, but her bank flagged him as suspicious. So the man explained that that could happen, and maybe he could send her a PayPal request, and then she could respond to it. So as she's doing this on the phone, her son overhears it and goes, Mom, it's a ripoff, hang up. And so she hung up. She now knows that she was targeted in a new scam that preys on people who just lost their loved ones. She said, they just catch you at such a weak moment. Her husband died at the age of 53 back in July. There's a special place in hell for people like that. And I agree. The funeral home swindle adds to an already long list of fraudulent schemes rampant in the U.S. And the Federal Trade Commission actually said in a blog post, if there was a scammer's hall of shame, this would make the top 10 without question. Here's how it works. Perpetrators look for obituaries online. They then call loved ones of the recently deceased, claiming to be from the funeral home, which is often listed in the obituary, and say that they are involved in making the arrangements for the funeral, and they need to pay a deposit to secure the service or cremation. So I hope that people who run funeral homes right now are realizing that they need to do stuff to take care of this. So when you meet with somebody for the first time and they make the arrangements with you, you need to tell them, by the way, if anybody calls you from here, claiming to be from here, okay, be skeptical, but maybe hang up and call back and call us on this number here and hand them your card to make sure it's from us. In some cases, the scammers mask their phone number to make it appear as if the call is coming from the funeral home by spoofing the number. So again, you might say, but Steve, that will help you, because if someone calls you the spoofed number and you hang up and call the real number back, you don't get the spoofer. Is that what they're called, a spoofer? To prey on individuals and families at such a vulnerable time is despicable. The lowest of the low, says Jessica Koth, Director of Public Relations for the National Funeral Homes Directors Association. So I hope, like I said, that they're going to crack down on this. Several funeral homes across the country have posted on social media warning people about the scam, but it's still taking some people by surprise. And that's the whole point, is that somebody who gets this call has never gotten it before, most likely. Hope Etherton, a funeral director in northeastern Alabama, was with a family preparing for a visitation when the wife of the deceased received a call on her cell phone. The caller ID said it was the funeral home of the woman who's sitting right there. The man on the other end of the line told her that he was, in fact, a funeral director at the home. So perplexed, the woman passed the phone over to the woman from the home. who said, I let him know who I was and that Blake was my brother once I told him that he hung up. I'm just glad the family was with me when it happened. Meanwhile, another woman's mother died in June at the age of 76. After the family scheduled her cremation at a funeral home in Texas, the home posted an online obituary. Not long after, their father received a phone call from a man saying he worked for the funeral home and needed just $200 deposit to get things going. He says, I took over the call and said, a deposit for what? The child asked. The man said it was for insurance in case anything were to happen. Funeral insurance. So she works as a manager at a convenience store and is wise to scams and said she was suspicious. So she hung up, called the funeral home, and they confirmed it was a bogus call. I wish this guy would have called me back. I was planning to tell him I'll pay him $200, but it's going to be in cash. So he has to meet me somewhere. Of course, he's probably not in North America. And then his family would be planning his funeral, she said jokingly. The FTC recommends that people resist the pressure to act immediately on anything and to call the funeral home directly if they have doubts about the person on the other end of the phone. Anyone who pressures you to pay or give them your personal information is a scammer, the agency says. Meanwhile, the woman in Florida said she initially felt a wave of embarrassment over almost falling for the scam. But she decided to post a message on Facebook about her experience in a bid to warn others. I don't want anyone to be scammed like this at such a tender time in their lives. And of course, this is one of the lowest of the low that people would prey on those who'd recently lost a loved one by posing as a funeral home employee and asking for more money at a time when the person is at perhaps their lowest emotionally. But quite often, if you look at obituaries, it'll actually say, so-and-so passed away, loving mother and wife, grandmother, and then they'll list survived by her husband, her kids, her grandkids, with names and the town, of course, where they lived, and then the funeral home where the funeral's going to take place. So someone can look at this and go, okay, she passed away, but the husband's still alive. He's probably handling the arrangements. They live in this town, and here's the funeral home. So you look up the funeral home, get the phone number, spoof the phone number, call the surviving husband. You call the husband, and it's not that difficult to do. And this is one, I'm assuming, that's gotten more widespread now that more of this has migrated onto the internet. Because in the old days, the obituary would run in the local newspaper, and people in the local area would read it if they read the obituaries. But now this stuff is all online. So somebody sitting in an internet cafe anywhere can look up obituaries for small towns across America and start making phone calls. So it's sad, and it is an indication of how far some people will sink to steal money from others. So everybody who sent it, thanks a lot. Rick Shapiro wrote that for NBC News. Despicable funeral home scam targets grieving family members. Another one to put in the back of your mind for later. Questions or comments, put them below. Those will talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Press any key except no, not that one.